Good morning, maybe good evening or good afternoon for those who are watching. Hi, my name is Vivian Acquah, and I'm a certified diversity executive. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with Buki today. And let me catch the bio for today's session, right? So, Buki is a leading expert on workplace bias navigation. He's the founder and CEO of London-based diversity think tank, creator of I Do methodology, and also the bias navigation test. He's also the author of I Don't Understand, navigating unconscious bias in the workplace. So if you don't know about his book, look it up on Amazon and all the bookstores so that you can grab it. But I am curious. You came recommended by my dear friend Marjolein Fleur, and those who come recommended, I have to pursue. So, welcome, Buki, for joining this conversation. I'm curious, and let's start with an icebreaker. Who are you, personally and professionally?
Well, yeah, personally, my background. I'm English. I'm British. My heritage is Nigerian, West African,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I guess that says a lot about who I am. Um, uh, and yeah, I guess I would describe myself as a observant, introspective individual.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense of the world first from looking inside and then looking outside and seeing if there's a fit between what I see inside and what's happening outside and trying to make sense of that. And I guess that was at the core of my need to come up with the IDU methodology. Uh,
Mm-hmm. I don't understand.
yeah, I
Right?
don't
Yeah.
understand because when I look, I run a set as apart from my bias navigation practice.
Mm-hmm.
I also my DEI practice. I also run a sales training consultancy and practice. And
Mm-hmm.
when I first started that, I would go into organizations and I would speak. And some people say to me, "Oh, you speak so well."
Oh.
And I used to think, well, what do you mean I speak so well? What are you trying to say?
Yeah.
It's like a
Yeah.
backhanded compliment. Just because I'm a black guy, you're saying I speak so well. That was my thought
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
thought going down the escalator or
Yeah.
going down the stairs or in the lift, I think, or elevator if you're in the States, right? I would think to myself, well, hang on. Maybe they just thought I spoke well. What's the matter with that? So this thing would do my head in because I would hear this, you speak so well, and I wasn't sure if it was a backhanded compliment or if it was just an actual compliment. And the worst thing as well, is that it would always happen in the morning. So it'd end up
Yeah.
ruining my lunch. And lunch is way too good to be ruined, right? So I thought I need to really sort this out because I'm going to have years of poor lunches. And I was.
Yeah.
So I
So
came up,
how did you battle this then? Did you ask somebody?
no, I decided that I would determine how I would respond. And I would always give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
Why
true,
not? Less for them and more for me, but more for
true,
both of us. It's a
true,
way of de-escalating any kind of tension in you and any potential tension in the other person. So I'd always give people the benefit of the doubt,
true.
but
We
I
can
would
do
al-
better.
I would always call the bias out, the sense bias out,
Mhm,
and give the benefit of that,
mhm.
but call it out in a light way. So
Yeah,
light
mhm.
reconditioning. So I would, so if a person said now to me, you speak so well, I say, fine, thank you. So do you, thank you. Um, but if I felt there was something there, I might say, oh, you sound surprised. And then I'd move
Yeah,
on and enjoy my lunch. I don't
yeah,
need to like start having that conversation in my head. Yeah, just because I'm a black, you're saying that 'cause I'm a black guy. What do you mean?
yeah,
What do you? Which is what I used to do, which would create tension in me, which would affect your disposition,
yeah.
affect the way people respond to you, and suddenly the energy is all ruined. So now I just give people the benefit of the doubt, light reconditioning, move on, and
Mhm.
enjoy my lunch. And lunch
I like
suddenly is great.
that. I like that. And also for those who are watching, this is an example of microaggression. It can be perceived as
Mm,
microaggression or it cannot be perceived
mm,
as microaggression, right? It's microaggression is very personal.
yeah.
And thank you for sharing that question as well, because it does help when people say something like that or similar to
Yeah.
that, like,
Yeah.
how are you going to let this marinate and hijack your day? Are you going
Mm,
to do that, or are you going to give that energy back in a delicate way, strategic
mm,
way, but still give that energy back where it belongs to and boomerang it? So, thank
mm,
you.
mm. And sometimes,
Right.
just one, sorry.
No, no, no. Continue.
No, I
Yeah.
was just going to say, and sometimes always remember that sometimes there's nothing there. Sometimes it's you.
True.
Sometimes we don't, sometimes it could be you.
True.
That's
True.
why you always have to give the person the benefit of the doubt.
True. But if you hear this 10 times,
Hmm,
many times,
yeah. But the person said, I'm a good speaker, said I speak
yeah,
so well. And
yeah.
actually, I'll encourage people to listen to me speak and hire me to speak. But I'm not a bad speaker. So actually, maybe they just thought I spoke so well. And why
It
should I
makes
care?
sense.
Why should I
It makes
think
sense.
about the other? It's like people ask you, where are you from? And you say,
It
I'm
it
from
it it
London.
depends on the way they are asking. I'm trying to teach people to ask me about my food or my favorite food from my heritage, right? So
Yeah.
that it's a different way of asking the where are you from. I mean, the first time when people ask where are you from,
Mm,
and it's curiosity because you can sense it. You can sense sometimes you can sense the intention. But
right.
when they dig deeper, like no, where are you really from? That's when I shut down because
Mm,
it's it to me, it doesn't trigger any curiosity. It triggers annoyance when people are asking the follow-up question and the follow-up question as
yeah.
well.
Here's my thing, right?
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
instead of it triggering annoyance, give the person the benefit of the doubt. So a person said to me,
Mm.
where are you from? And I say, I'm from Notting Hill Gate in
Yeah.
London. And the person says,
Yeah.
well, yeah, but where are you really from? Right?
Exactly.
So then there,
Yeah.
you could get upset about that, but you could just say, oh, do
Yeah.
you mean my heritage? The
Mm.
person says, yes,
Mhm.
your heritage. Tell him your heritage, move on, and enjoy your lunch.
I will practice that. I will
Yeah,
practice that. I will practice
but
that. But let's
we don't
let's
take enough control of it. That's what I mean. We that's I think sometimes
Mhm.
we the burden, and this
Mhm.
can sound controversial to some people. Sometimes the burden is too much
Yeah.
on the traditional perpetrator.
I get it.
Why must somebody else be always walking on eggshells for me? Right?
Yeah.
Why don't I just give them the benefit of the doubt? Then nobody has to walk on eggshells. We create our own
True.
psychological safety or whatever, say,
Mhm.
in the moment
Mhm.
by giving them the benefit of the doubt, but calling it out anyway in a very light way.
Yeah. I get that. I do want to continue with the questions, right? So, when I talk about humanizing the workplace, what is your perspective on that?
So I think this is great, and I love that title, humanizing the workplace. And there's
Mhm.
many different ways of looking at it because you have to be. I was thinking about this whole humanizing. We have to be very careful. What is human nowadays is,
Mm.
when I hear humanizing, I look at it from a positive perspective,
Mhm.
and I think it's sharing of humanity and
Mhm.
being nice to each other, frankly,
Mhm.
right? That's what I think humanize, being real, being authentic, being
Mhm.
nice, you know,
Yeah.
because it's easier to be nice than to be anything else, right? You have
True.
to work at being hard. You know what I mean? You have to kind of
True.
shift your your mental paradigm to be hard. So
Mhm.
for me, humanization, if that's the right term, yeah, or humanizing of the workplace is creating doing your part to be part of or creating
Mhm.
a cohesive, harmonious environment.
I
And
love that.
yeah, so
I love that. But given the fact that we are addressing your book,
yes,
where there are some elements that aren't really humanizing, so let's start with the question that um, I read a part of this chapter and I chuckled the moment that you were talking about Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson. For those of you who don't know, please Google you were referencing the song Scream.
Yeah.
Again, go to YouTube, watch this video because to me it resonated the moment that I saw it. I could even, play it visually in my mind.
Mm.
And I'm curious about why are you referring to the song Scream when it comes to the quote, I don't understand.
Because when, it's a really good question. And it's because when you're on the receiving end of bias,
Mm-hmm.
this is how you feel.
Yeah,
When you sense bias, this is how you feel. You just want to scream. That
yeah,
song goes, makes me want to scream. That's what it's
exactly.
and you see the like Michael goes, ah, and it's like really
Exactly.
vivid when you watch the video.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how you feel because when you're on the receiving end of sensed bias, all these things are going through your mind, like 100 miles an hour. How dare,
Mm-hmm.
why do you always throw the baby out of the bathwater with people
Mm-hmm.
that look like me?
Yeah.
Why can't you give me the benefit of the doubt? How many times are you going to check my qualifications?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you asking me? Why do you distrust? I've worked with thousands of companies like yours. Why are you double checking? Why are you
Yeah.
throwing negative light on what I'm doing when clearly I've got so many accolades in relation to that? Why would you do that? Just because I'm different? You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
so this is, and you've got like these things going in your mind like 1,000, like 100 miles an hour, and you
Mm-hmm.
just want to scream at the person,
Yeah.
but you can't say anything. You can't do anything. So you have to keep it in. And this is the most frustrating and most debilitating feeling and experience that you can have. And I don't wish it on anyone. I really don't. So it just reminded me of that video, of that
Mm-hmm.
song, Scream, because Michael
Yeah.
was talking, he's a bit of a divisive guy, right? But he encapsulated
Yeah.
the feeling that I
Yeah.
had or have had, and I know others have had when
Yeah.
they've been on the receiving end
Yeah.
of, in the incivility, the injustice
Mm-hmm.
associated with career stifling unconscious bias.
Yeah, and also what I wanted to address, because while you were talking in my mind, I was thinking like for those who are on the receiving end, when organizations want to aim for high productivity, they want to get their business results, their business goals. And I'm just like, why is it so that many people don't understand that unconscious bias
Mm,
can harmfully impact the business goals, can harmfully impact the team goals? Because
mm,
you were talking about the person receiving it, it's
mm,
stifling. It's not getting them in a productive
mm,
state.
mm,
It's getting them into a low zoning state
mm,
where they are less productive and it
mm.
can also impact other people. But I want to go to your book because this is a question that I often ask the authors. What inspired you to write I Don't Understand Navigating Unconscious Bias in the Workplace?
Because I just didn't understand.
Mm,
Whenever here's the thing: whenever you're on the
yeah.
receiving end, like those examples I gave, when
Mhm.
you're on the receiving
Yeah.
end of what you sense to be this kind of injustice, this incivility, right?
Mhm.
Uh, um, in the moment,
Yeah.
the feeling is one of disbelief,
Yeah.
and you find yourself telling yourself, "I just don't understand how people could be so wicked. I just don't understand
Exactly.
the incivility of this behavior. How can
Yeah.
you just don't understand?" And you're calling it in. And I thought, well, instead of calling it in, what if I could call it out? So that
Mhm.
led me on a quest to find out
Mhm.
how I could articulate the
Mm.
the sense of injustice,
Mhm.
the sense of disbelief
Yeah.
that happens when you're on the receiving end of
Yeah.
bias. And that led me on the
Which
quest to find out how.
which
And
is not always easy also to explain to somebody else, right? Because oftentimes it's these secluded incidents that happen or situations or experience that happens to one or maybe a few people that find it hard to verbally share what happened to them and how it made them feel. It's not always easy to explain that because, like you said, it stifles you, it gets you angry, all these different emotions that can show up whilst you're going through that. And in the meantime, you're also having a debate, or at least I am having a debate like, did that really happen? Did
Yeah.
I crack it? Did
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
me of all
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
And also the other element I should say is that also what I found was in that opening example that I gave, that sometimes I was wrong.
yeah,
Right? So
yeah,
it was I felt a sense of disbelief, a kind of, is this really happening? I just don't understand why it's happening. That kind. So that was where the I don't understand came from. But there was also
mhm,
an element of, I just sometimes I get it wrong. Sometimes
yeah,
I sense bias towards me,
mhm,
and then I realize, oh, I was so wrong. I'll give you an
yeah.
example. If you want it, should I give an
Yeah,
example?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
please
yeah.
do.
So, there was a deal. I talk about this in my book, right? I went for a deal years ago, right? And
Mhm,
I went to meet, sorry, a deal. I went to meet a prospect in this huge
mhm,
Fortune 500 company, right? This was like 23 years ago, and it
mhm,
was the embryonic stages of starting my business at the time, which was a sales training.
mhm,
So I could barely spell unconscious bias, let alone know what it was about. Anyway,
mhm,
I went there and I had this meeting with. I met this guy, really a white English gentleman, in the morning. He was a chief revenue officer, and we got on so well. I mean, really
mhm,
well, right? And he said, "Buki, I love what you're doing. You need to you need to come back and present. Your timing's incredible. My management team, they're international. They're going to be here next week. Come and present,
mhm,
and do to us, and do a proposal." So I thought, great, this is going to happen. I'm in there. So
mhm,
I came back the next week, and I was waiting in the reception, and Mark, um, they called him to come down. And he comes down. I went, "Morning, Mark." And he was cold, like ice, like freezing. So I'm thinking, is this the same Mark that I saw last week?
mhm,
The real Mark, please stand up. Right? He was so cold. Anyway, he takes me up to a boardroom, to his management team. And if he was cold in the reception, he's sub-zero there. He just
yeah,
basically says present. He barely introduces me to them. So I thought, here we go again. Another white, middle class, heterosexual male, who's embarrassed about putting me forward for a high profile assignment,
mhm,
right? And I thought that because it happened to me before in the embryonic stages of my business. So I thought, here we go again. Anyway, I did the
mhm,
presentation. I was enthusiastic. I left. And I thought, well, this is not going anywhere. And I forgot about it. 2 weeks later, I get a call. It's Mark, right? And he says, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm fine." He said, "How do you think it went?" I said, "I always enjoy these things. So I'm more interested in how you thought it went." And I
mhm,
also thought to myself, why are you calling me? You weren't
mhm.
calling me to rub the salt in my wounds. Why don't you just send me a commiseration email? Right? Anyway,
Yeah,
he says to me, "Buki, my team loved you. They loved you. Can you get here on Wednesday?" It was Monday.
exactly,
He was like, "Can you get
exactly.
here on Wednesday? I want to talk and get this thing done." Cut a long story short, we got the deal.
Yeah.
Right? So in that situation, who was biased, me or Mark?
You, because Mark was having a bad day. Mark might be not sleeping. Mark was worried about the revenue or some other business goals, right? So Mark wasn't fully there.
Hmm.
That
So
tipped
I,
you off.
yeah, well, actually, what transpired is that
Mhm.
Mark, right, um, didn't want to show that
Ooh,
he was in favor of me.
he
So
wanted to show neutral.
he wanted
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
neutral because he was wary of like kind of confirm, this kind of he was
Information bias.
biased,
Yeah.
yeah. So he was wary of that. So that's why he was a bit away, right? Um,
He could have
and
told you.
no, but maybe I would have done it in a different way. But
Yeah.
actually, he was being the
Mhm.
most fair and most
Yeah.
uh, per- person that you could think of.
Yeah.
He wanted his people to come to their own conclusion because it was an informal tender. So he wanted them to
Yeah.
come to their own conclusion instead of influencing them. And they did come to the right conclusion, in his opinion,
Mhm.
which was to choose me, but they did it off their own
Mhm.
back. So actually,
True.
I was the biased person there. So
True.
um, that's when I realized situations like that made me
Mhm.
realize there's actually two forms of bias. There's
Mhm.
in my book I describe as directional bias, which is
Mhm.
towards you because of your race and ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your gender, your age, your socioeconomic
Mhm.
background. That's towards you. That's the one that we're all aware of, where people
Mhm.
unconsciously treat you unfairly because of your difference, right?
Mhm.
But there's also reverse bias where you misinterpret, where a
Yeah.
minority misinterprets their unfavorable or sensed
Mhm.
unfavorable decisions towards them as driven by unconscious bias when they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you do that, that's your bias. So now
Yeah.
you become the perpetrator and the other person becomes the victim, regardless of
It could have
power.
also affected it could have also affected your deal,
Of
right?
course
You
it
could have
could.
also turned down, changed your mood where you did not get the lead, right? So I
Exactly.
totally get it.
And
Yeah.
dehumanize me. You know what I mean? Make me demonize me and make me feel like, what's the matter? Make them feel, what's the matter with this guy? Why is he going
Yeah.
at you? So
Yeah.
we have to be cognizant and wary of two forms of bias. But traditional training doesn't tell you that. Traditional
True.
training says you close your eyes, think of a pilot. And you think of a pilot, and they say, "Oh, you
Mhm.
see a white male, or you never see a person who's disabled, or you never see a black person. Don't worry, you're not biased. We all have bias." That's what they say, right? And then what happens is that the training that they do is all about one direction. They never
True.
the training, the bulk of the training is never about the other side. It's always about the
But also
majority.
what you are addressing is, as practitioners, we have to be aware of our own biases, but also show up and say to our clients that we are not free of bias. We are human. We
Yeah,
show up with all our biases, so we are human when it comes to that as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the training doesn't say that. The training says what you just
Yeah.
said, but then it only talks about improving the situation from one perspective. I call
Yeah.
this the guilty perpetrator versus hapless victim model. There are
I wanna touch upon that because I do have a question. You
mm,
in the book, you talk
yeah,
about the guilt and the pain mindsets.
yeah.
How is this connected to unconscious bias?
So well, in a couple of ways. First of all, um, there is most training, most
Mhm.
initiatives when it comes to career stifling unconscious bias. So this is I'm making
Mhm.
a difference here between unconscious bias in recruitment, for example, right? That's slightly different, right? So
Mhm.
career stifling, the stuff that means that there's no very few like black people in senior
Mhm.
roles or high profile roles in organizations relative to the majority, to the white majority. I'm talking about that, or women in senior roles relative to men, right? That kind of bias, right?
Mhm.
When it comes to addressing that, 99% of organizations throughout the world, right, subscribe to a guilty perpetrator versus hapless victim model. That says that
Mhm.
there are these people who look a certain way, walk and talk a certain way. They are
Mhm.
the guilty perpetrator by default. And
Yeah.
there are these people who look a certain way, walk and talk a certain way, and they are the hapless victim of
Mhm.
bias by default. And that's an oversimplistic model. In reality, based on the story I told you, and I could tell you others, you can see that it's a lot more fluid. Sometimes the minority can be the guilty perpetrator, and
Yeah.
sometimes the white majority can be the guilty perpetrator,
Mhm.
right? It's not always white as well. It could just be male, right? Or it could be any number of things, right?
Yeah.
So most training starts with that incorrect paradigm, is
Mhm.
subscribing to that. And on top of that, that is underpinned, right,
Mhm.
by white guilt, right?
Mhm.
Stuff that's happened in the past, right?
Mhm.
And also stuff that's happening at the moment,
Mhm.
and minority pain and retribution. So pain for what's happened to maybe me in the past, or maybe my people like me in the past, and retribution mindset. So guilt, pain, and retribution mindset. And the problem with that is that when you come up with strategies to address career stifling bias, unconscious bias in the workplace,
Mhm.
underpinned by the guilt, pain, and retribution, you will always come up with the wrong answer because it impairs your vision. It
Yeah.
clouds your vision. So you come up with the
Yeah.
wrong solutions, right? The wrong solution, like, it's worth me saying this. Wrong solution looks like this: getting all your leaders into a room and spending who will invariably be white in the West and
Mhm.
male, or not
Mhm.
always male, but majority male, getting them in a room and spending inordinate amounts of time on awareness and bias interruption.
Mhm.
That is driven by guilt mindset,
Yeah.
pain, and retribution, right? Another incorrect thing that comes as a result of guilt pain mindset is this obsession with safe spaces. There's nothing wrong with a safe space, but this obsession. I sense bias towards me. I need to go to I'm encouraged to go to some kind of safe space, maybe some employee relationship group or whatever, and talk to someone, or my HR director, talk to them about the bias that I've sensed. But as we've seen, right, there's room for misinterpretation. So what I'm going to talk to the person about, actually, I could be wrong. We don't allow for that. We just assume that when I sense bias, I'm 100% correct. Right? And so what happens is that I go and tell someone who I feel psychologically safe to talk to. Now, invariably, since I'm a black man, the person I'll go and talk to is another black man, which reinforces the bias about the white majority.
Yeah.
Likewise, the white
is this a form of also demystifying the bias paranoia, or is this something else when I talk about?
Well, I think it's just, yeah, it is kind of bias paranoia. I just think you asked me about the guilt and pain mindset, right? The guilt pain mindset, and I add retribution to that mindset, causes people to address career stifling unconscious bias in the wrong way. Encouraging people to go to safe, why not encourage someone, equip someone with the wherewithal, with the skills to create their own safe space in the moment whenever they sense bias? Encourage them to go and talk to someone, just reinforces the bias about the white majority. Likewise, the white majority leader, for example, when they sense my misinterpretation or reverse bias, they don't tell me. What they might do is have a conversation maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks later with somebody that they have psychological safety with, who will invariably be a white male or whatever, white leader like them. And they'll say, look, yeah, I'm really sympathetic with the equality cause, but sometimes these minorities sense bias when it's not there. And that person will say, yeah, that's happened to me, which then reinforces the bias about minorities having chips on their shoulders. And never the twain shall meet. And this is where we live. So all these trainings that people are doing, where they're spending inordinate amounts of time interrupting on bias interruption, which invariably, not that I'm trying to let off anybody, which invariably is leaders trying to correct themselves of this imaginary original sin, is a waste of time. Why not equip everybody with the skills to call it out?
In a way, I get you and I understand you, and that's also in a way why I often provide virtual reality training for people. Instead of imagine it, people can really experience the different levels of biases and also the challenges that can be there, where the reverse bias will be there as well when they can act up, and also they can see the perceived biases as well. Oftentimes the biases that they don't experience will be experienced by them in real life now, or in the virtual reality world as well. Yeah.
Well, I think that's really, I think that's good, because I think it's important to people. And what people don't understand is or I feel not enough attention is allocated, is that this thing is happening all the time. It's happening every minute. It only becomes an issue when there's risk, like risk to your career, or risk to your reputation, or risk to your well-being. Suddenly it raises and we become aware of it, but it's actually happening all the time. So we need to equip everybody with the skills to navigate it. Not saying you people are guilty, whoever those people are. Change yourself so that these people can be better. Because
how would you equip the managers and leaders when it comes to mitigating biases, unconscious biases?
Well, I think pretty much the same way as I would do with the minority. I think we need to equip everybody. So let's start again. So sorry, I'll stay on your question, but I think we need to equip everybody. We can't have this obviously minorities and ethnic minority is a very close to home, right? Are
Mhm.
on the wrong end of bias. We get it
Mhm.
more, right?
Yeah.
Right? But bias is a two-way street, not a one-way street. Workplace
True.
bias. I'm talking about
Yeah.
in the workplace, right? I'm not talking about racism. A lot of people
Mhm.
mix it all up. I'm talking about workplace is a two-way street. So if it's a
Mhm.
two-way street, you have to equip everybody. And here's the irony. Here's the irony of it. Most people, 99% of organizations don't do that, right?
Yeah.
And by not doing that, they're creating an they're excluding the minorities because they're saying that the problem is with these traditional white leaders, they need to change. So then you're actually
Mhm.
excluding the minority from the resolution model. So you're saying,
Mhm.
sit there,
Yeah.
you don't worry, we've got your back, we'll change, and your life will get better. So you condemn them to victimhood. And
Yeah.
worse, the minority buys into it. So the minority now is sitting there waiting on his hands or her hands for someone else to change for their career to
Mhm.
get better. So we need
Yeah.
to equip everybody. So to answer your question, what I show people is one is that there are two forms of bias. So if I was a
Mhm.
minority and I wanted to call out bias, step one, right, is mindset, setting my mindset,
Mhm.
right? That's step one, right? So
Mhm.
setting my mindset means leaving my bag, dropping all my baggage, right? Racial bias baggage, gender bias
Yeah.
baggage, sexual orientation
Mhm.
baggage. I need to drop it. Even though I have every right in the world, based on the representation I see, to be suspicious when I'm not shortlisted or when I'm not
Mhm.
getting the same, I've every right, but I need to drop that. Now,
Mhm.
why do you think I need to drop that baggage?
You need to be open for other perspective, right? And also understand that it's about unlearning your habits and your behaviors to become more inclusive.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And also, I think it's the only way I can get to step two. Have you seen
Yeah.
the Karate Kid? Have you seen that film, Karate Kid?
I've seen the series. I've seen the movie as well in the past, but the series also is similar to the movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a series, but I've seen there's
Yeah.
anyway, with the movie, right?
Mhm.
There's this guy in the original movie. So there were two movies. The
Mhm.
original movie, right?
Mhm.
There was this guy, he was like a sage. His name was
Yeah.
Mr. Miyagi. And he had
Mhm.
this protege whose name was Daniel
Yeah.
Clarusso or LaRusso.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Daniel was bullied, right? And
Mhm.
so he taught him karate and he became really good. And he
Mhm.
enters into a competition. And yeah, he gets to the final stage. He beats everyone, gets to the final stage, and then he gets scared. He starts to
Mhm.
think of the bullying that used to happen to him,
Mhm.
and he gets really worried, and he's scared of it. He doesn't want to have the final fight. And Miyagi, the sage, says to him, "Empty your head. Empty
Mm.
your head." Now, why is he saying empty his head? Right, so he
Yeah.
can have clarity. Right, so
Mhm.
his vision isn't impaired by what's happened to him before, and it's exactly
Yeah.
the same with bias. So step one is empty your head, right? Is drop
Mhm.
your baggage so that you can move to step two. So the question then becomes, what is step two? So step two is
Mhm.
give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So step
Yeah.
one is set your mindset. Step two is give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But
Mhm.
here's the rub. Here's the difficult bit. Call the bias out anyway.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing workshops, people say to me, how can you possibly give somebody the benefit of the doubt but call them out anyway? Well, the way to give them the benefit of the doubt and call them out, right? At the same or call out the bias, sorry, not them,
Mhm.
right? Call out the bias is to say these three powerful words.
Mhm. And
I
that
don't
is?
understand. I
Ooh.
don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just tell them you don't
Yeah.
turn it into a question. So you
Mhm.
turn the statement into a question. I don't
Yeah.
understand. And what you're going to find happens, right, is that you're going to invoke their natural instinct to give direction. That is, the
Yeah.
person will say, what don't you understand? And now
Mhm.
you're into an otherwise sticky conversation about bias, which you wouldn't have been able to.
True.
Or, or the
True.
person's going to say to you, let me explain. And now
Yeah.
you're into that conversation. And if you still don't understand, then say that.
Yeah.
So we call
Yeah.
that developmental inquiry. So you ask
Yeah.
me, so that's the third step. So step one is set your mindset. Step
Mhm.
two, right, is give the person the benefit of the doubt, but call them out. How do you call them
Mm.
out? You engage in developmental inquiry. I don't
Yeah.
understand, right?
Yeah.
And what you're going to find is when you go into that when we teach it, but when you go into that kind of conversation, what you begin to realize is either the bias towards you will call itself out. So you don't need to say you gave the job to her, you didn't give it to me. You know, it'll actually come out. Or what will happen is that your reverse bias, your misinterpretation of the situation will call itself out. Or what will happen is a bit of both will call itself out. And then you can move to step 4 and collaboratively agree next steps. Now, if you look at that whole process, it's very collaborative.
True.
But you can't get on that train. You can't even get on that unless you accept the multi-directional nature. So you ask me, how do I tell majority leaders? Right? It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Set your mindset. When a person tells you that when you sense reverse bias, right? When you sense reverse bias towards you as a leader, you need to drop your baggage. Don't assume that a black person who has an issue with promotion is playing the race card. That's your baggage. Don't assume that a woman is playing the gender card. Don't assume that a person of minority sexual orientation or a person with disability is playing that card either, or all 4 sometimes, right? Give them the benefit of the doubt, and it's the same process. You just follow that same process. I mean, I've given you the edited highlights version, but that's essentially it.
Yeah. I'm also curious into what you suggest in the book regarding measuring the effectiveness of unconscious biases interventions in organizations. What do you say about that?
So that's a really good question, right? And I think there's a couple of ways of looking at it. I think, let me tell you what the wrong way is, right? Right? And again, a lot of people would disagree with me, but my book wasn't written to make people agree with me. It was written, for the wrong way, and what the vast majority of people do is they measure their unidirectional one-way street view type training and initiatives around unconscious bias based on things like asking people, do you feel comfortable bringing yourself to work? Your authentic self. Do you trust senior management? All of this kind of stuff. So that seems like the right thing to do, but it's the wrong thing to do. Right? And the reason why, you can do an element of that. So don't get me wrong. I don't want to just rubbish it completely, right? But that alone is the wrong thing to do. And the reason why it's the wrong thing to do, right, is because it comes from a place of eradication, an eradication mindset. That have we gotten rid of all this bias? So now do you feel better?
Yeah.
But as you and I know, you can't get rid of bias because you can't eradicate it.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to come from you told me about how you measure it. You need to come from a navigation perspective. To what extent do people feel that they are equipped to navigate bias?
Yeah.
That's how you can measure the effectiveness, right? You can actually numerically measure that. In my book, I go into a lot more detail, but you can numerically measure that. And you can measure that for at one point, and then you can measure it again. And you'll know if you're doing well if people feel comfortable in navigating it. But you can't teach people how to navigate it unless you accept the multi-directional nature. And in terms of results, you can really get granular with that. You can look at departments in organizations, and you can see to what extent certain people, or no, to what extent the whole organization, managers, people managers, staff feel effective, feel comfortable, or feel that they can navigate bias. And that has an impact on how comfortable they are in their role. That also, when a person is confident and comfortable in expressing themselves, they tend to do far better than when they're not.
True.
Now, these are all qualitative and quantitative ways of measuring unconscious, bias navigation training, which is what it should be. Unconscious bias training is basically awareness. Bias navigation is equipping people with skills to navigate it at every level, from board level to new starter?
I have two questions left. One question is, in the book you talk about peeve or leave
Yeah.
exercise. I'm sorry, it's late at the day.
Mm.
Can you share more context about the peeve or leave exercise?
Yeah, so the peeve or leave exercise is interesting. This is your internal GPS. So this is
Mm-hmm.
what I think you should use in terms of how you determine when in the moment, when you're on the
Yeah,
receiving end of what you
yeah.
perceive to be career stifling bias, be it microaggressions, be it more
Mm-hmm.
complex. I should be partner. I'm better than the person that they shortlisted. They didn't even shortlist me,
Yeah.
right? This is kind of complex bias, very difficult
Mm-hmm.
to deal with. So when you sense that you're on the receiving end of any form of bias, before you even react or do anything, you need to determine one, what you're on the receiving end of. Is it
Mm-hmm.
simple bias,
Yeah.
microaggression, or is it complex bias, this kind of career
Mm-hmm.
stifling, more detailed career stifling bias? And then secondly, how you're going to respond. And the peeve or
Yeah.
leave helps you with that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so in the book, I give an example. I said when I used to gave example, like at the top of this, I talked about um, people saying I speak so well and stuff, and that's
Mm-hmm.
doing my head in,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So what I decided is that I better come up with a system for determining
Mm-hmm.
how I'm going to respond to a kind of
Exactly.
unconscious bias. And I used to think that there were two ways I could respond. I had what I called the LTFU way, which is I hear something, and LTFU stands for lighten the fudge up, right?
Oh.
Right. So that was so sometimes you hear
Yeah.
something, you don't have to make a big deal of it. Just lighten the
Mhm.
fudge up, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
there was the YSPMO.
Mhm.
So YSPMO was you're so peeving me off. You're so
Mm.
peeving me off, right? So
Mhm.
I decided to turn that into something more palatable for workshops, right? So I
Mhm.
called that the peeve or leave. So the first thing is
Mm.
when you hear something, you should determine, is this a peeve moment or a leave moment? A peeve moment
Yeah.
is have an extended conversation, right?
Mhm.
A leave moment is kind of just bat it away, like I did
Yeah.
with that example. So
Yeah.
person says to you, speak so well, let's try it. Person says to you,
Yeah.
speak so well. Is that peeve or leave?
I would say leave. For me personally, it would be a leave.
Me too. So I'm just
Yeah.
going to leave that. I'm just going to say, well, yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
And if I think there's something there, I might say, well, you sound surprised, and then I'll move on and enjoy my lunch. I'm not going to
Yeah.
start having questions in my head and losing it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I've dealt with it. Problem with microaggressions is the cumulative impact. If you can
Mhm.
deal with it and shut it down, you're less likely to
Yeah.
have another one. But most people don't shut it down. They go to a
Yeah.
safe space and talk to someone.
Yeah.
And then, right, person says, right, all right, let's give you another one. You're right. Person says to you, your people, your lot, you always
Oh.
are. Peeve or
Oh.
leave? Is that a peeve or leave?
Definitely a peeve.
That's a
Definitely a
peeve.
peeve.
So now we
Yeah.
have to have a conversation,
Yeah.
right? So that's what the peeve or leave is. First, it's your internal GPS determining
Mhm.
what you're on the receiving end of. Is it simple bias or complex bias? And if it's complex, you're going to have a conversation, like
Mhm.
the model I showed you. And if it's simple bias, then you're just going to bat it away. So the
Yeah.
peeve or leave tool, the internal GPS, helps you do that.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. And also thank you for sharing the two examples. I've reached the final question. Um, what is your hope for 2030 when it comes to humanizing the workplace and unconscious biases at work?
So I think um, my hope would be this:
Mhm.
that people accept. In fact, whoever's listening to this,
Mhm.
my hope, my wish, my prayer for you is, if you don't already,
Mhm.
openly accept and acknowledge the
Yeah.
multi-directional nature of workplace bias. Because when you do that, you're
Yeah.
essentially saying we're all the same. And if we're saying
Mhm.
we're all the same, then we are humanizing the workplace because we treat each
Exactly.
other equally.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation, and I really enjoyed talking to you. So, for those who are watching the live stream or ending, you're watching it now, please watch the replay. And Buki, thank you for joining in this conversation as well. I really enjoyed the conversation, so thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, everybody. Bye.
Bye.